streets about Reverend Navarro?
Okay, you'll have to.
What was the news on streets about Reverend Navarro?
What was the news on the streets?
Yeah.
Well, what I can do is tell you how I met Reverend Navarro. I can tell you how I came to be in Omaha, the impact that he was having all over the state, because I'm from Scottsbluff, Nebraska, which is at the complete extreme western part of the state. And there was a movement, which was part of the 60s and 70s movement going on at that time. And there was a lot of, I would say it was like a revolution. It was a lot of activity on the parts of blacks and Chicanos, Native Americans, and liberal whites who were very upset with the Vietnam War. And these issues came together, and it ended up with a strange coalition of people. And I got hired on this agency called CAP Agency, Community Action Program. It's an old Office of Economic Opportunity program that was designed to help poor people. And it was a reaction to all the unrest. The government tried to put resources towards helping generate some programs that were going to take people out of their condition. And so I was made, this was back in the 69 so I was made the housing director of the CAP agency, and we had a state meeting in Lincoln of housing issues, and that's where I met Reverend Robert Navarro. We sat down and we talked and stuff. And Mike Adams, he was another individual. He eventually became my boss, but Reverend Navarro liked me right off the bat, and I liked him. I didn't know much about him, but we hit it off, and he says, "Listen, if you ever want to come to Omaha, just let me know. We'd sure like to have you there." And so when I went back to Scottsbluff, I found out that he was involved in a lot of things, like the creation of the Mexican American Commission, which is a state program, the Chicano Awareness Center, the Indian Chicano Health Clinic, the Goodrich Scholarship Program, and I'm missing something else, but anyway, that was what was going on. That there's this reverend he's from the Lutheran Church, as opposed to a Catholic priest. You know, the Lutheran Church would put together a lot of resources by the church in trying to engage and deal with the issues of the 60s and 70s. And so he was a reverend who taught for the church, and they supported him. So a lot of the support that we got was from the Lutheran Church. Now, things got real hot in Scottsbluff, but I had already come to Omaha because things were getting a little rough. And the first thing I did was call Reverend Navarro. He was real happy to. Next day, he says, "Go down to university." And met Mike Adams. I got my job there as a counselor, and because I was going to school at the same time. And he says, "Welcome to Omaha." And that's when I got involved with Reverend Robert Navarro and all the issues that he was dealing with here in Omaha. He was like a Renaissance man. He was. I couldn't compare him. He wasn't a fire and brimstone guy. He's meek, quiet, but extremely intelligent, extremely articulate, and he demanded respect, which I gave him, of course. But all these young people, the very few Mexicanos, Chicanos were going to college at that time. Very few were graduating from high school. So it was through me and through other individuals associated with the Lutheran Church, like Larry Barrientos and Al Rodriguez, Mr. Montelongo, Maya Montelongo, and Senor Aguilera, that they provided the community input as part of their involvement with the Chicano Awareness Center, which was another agency that he started. The Chicano Awareness Center, again, was a natural offshoot of the Chicano movement, which they embraced, they being the Lutheran Church. The Lutheran Church embraced Chicanismo, and Reverend Robert Navarro was the titular head. He was the organizer, he was the inspiration, and he had a natural following with the students, especially UNO students and myself, and a lot of his own church members. But the community really, I mean, it was timely, it was perfect because it became the hub and it was the Chicano Awareness Center. I don't know if you want to get into the concept or not, but the Chicano Awareness Center was designed to provide a new identity for La Raza. Okay, and as part of it was to provide, I would say, feelings of positive feelings of who you were, what your traditions, customs, because we're all Americans. I'm third generation American of Mexican descent, and so we had nothing up to that point so that we could grab onto and say, well, okay, so you're an American of Mexican descent. What does that mean? Well, the institutional component of the it's just getting too tough, of the assimilation process deals with a white model, like a white nationalist model, which has its roots in the 13 colonies. So everything as they moved westward, they never included the people that they took over, so to speak. Like what did they do with the slaves? Well, they made them non-human. And through genocide, they killed the indigenous people. And then people like my family, who knows how far back, because they're predominantly from Mexico, there was never any mention of them. So we grew up thinking of that the father of our country was George Washington. And, all these founding fathers were our heroes. And through omission, they never did mention my background or what my family contributed. And so there was like, you can assimilate in America, but if you assimilate thinking you're American, and all of a sudden you come up to this color barrier or cultural barrier, you find out that once they labeled you a minority, a subgroup, a Mexican American, a Black American, Native American, once they've labeled you that, you become a sub-American. You're no longer a, quote, American. And so you may speak English, you know all the history of America as they're in their perspective, but you don't know nothing about yourself. So there you are, you know, you don't really belong. So the Chicano Awareness Center was designed to create a new identity and to create self-determination and self-identity. And that's what, and so in that center, you have youth programs called Juventud. Juventud, that means young in Spanish. The Juventud program was just to set up committees or boards and ask them what it is that they wanted to do. And a lot of them said they wanted more different type of education, you know, more of the arts, dancing, you know, find out what their roots were. So there was like 300 students in that, mainly from South Omaha and Bryan and the areas. In addition to that, one of the priorities of again, trying to teach you who you are, like the history. So there was a lot of Chicano Chicano history classes taught at the Chicano Awareness Center by professors from the university. We coordinated and made part of a person, like if you're a teacher and you got 12 hours to teach or something, well, 3 of those hours would be committed to the Chicano Awareness Center as part of your duties, and that's how we were able to, for free, take advantage of. So they'd be teaching you your history. They were. In addition to that, we had dance classes, which is part of the culture. You know, they taught you how to dance the jarabe tapatio and that. And again, this was a person that was hired by the university and assigned to the Chicano Awareness Center. Music, we had we created little mariachis. We played guitar and stuff. In fact, that's one of the guitars over there. When I was playing, I got taught because I did not know how to speak Spanish very good, and I was a rock and roller. But through the Chicano Awareness Center, I began to really appreciate my music again because of Rosemary Flores, who was a teacher with the Omaha Public School, music teacher at the time. And Rosemary, she taught so many young kids. She created so many young mariachis. You know, some of those guys are all playing professional. I heard of Marcos Mora. He plays or Bad Combination, Sabor, these mariachi groups. Most of them came from Rosemary. See? And now they're old, real old, like 40s. But again, this is part of what Reverend Navarro brought to our community. And he also, as part of the whole entire service type needs, one was the area of medicine. Created an Indian health clinic, and the Lutheran Church was behind that. But there weren't that many Indians in Omaha, and so Reverend Navarro and Dr. Crawford, they decided to combine and create an Indian Chicano health clinic. And they worked with mainly Creighton University, Dr. Shaddy, and eventually they incorporated the University of Nebraska Medical Center. But that started out, again, sponsored by the Lutheran Church, started out in a little house over on 15th, and the pictures I got will have a picture of Reverend Navarro, myself, and other members when we dedicated the new health clinic on 20th and Martha, or 20th and Castelar. Those clinics, that clinic was designed to provide free clinic services to Indians and Chicanos. And that thing, it just, there was a real need for that. And so you can hardly get in there. I think they offered 2 nights of clinics, Tuesday and Thursday nights. And these doctors from these universities would come in and offer free. And I remember saving a lot of people came in, had some real problems like cancer. You know what I'm saying? Keep your eye on me now. Cancer, you know what I'm saying? Strokes, heart problems. And because of that screening process, they were able to get help. Now, going back to the Chicano Awareness Center, while the Lutheran Church could support you and the movement was part of their motivation, the movement finally slowed down. The Chicano movement, the black movement, the Indian movement, Vietnam had already been lowering in terms of its intensity, and we in fact eventually got out. Well, along with that came the cutting of funds. So we're losing our funding, which was not much, but we didn't require much because we had just a little old building there in South Omaha. But our objective was to get what we call hard, soft funding. That was through United Way. But we knew that as soon as we got those, once we start to adhere to United Way policies and procedures, that we could not have, we couldn't be the advocates, the shoot 'em up, Viva la Raza type advocates. You had to be a little more conservative. So we knew that our advocacy period was going to end once we got that money. And sure enough, Pat McKee, who was the director at the time, he got a grant from United Way for $50,000. And that's when we were able to go over to where it is now on 24th and set up the Chicano Awareness Center. Then along came, again, it became such a huge entity that the corporate interests took over. Like, those are bills. Like First National Bank and others. And they began to contribute more money. And they changed the name from Chicano Awareness Center to Latino Center of the Midlands. And I believe this is like in 2002 or something. But there was, I think that what happened is that back in the 70s, that the predominant Latino group, let's call it, were Mexicans, of Mexicans lineage. So Chicano Mexican, that was pretty well accepted. But when in the 1990s, 93 on up, there were more Central Americans that came, and they felt it was better to change the name to Latino to be more inclusive. That little gem of vision that Reverend Navarro had is what created all this. And you've seen it like he planted it, and then he left. He wasn't here that long, a couple of years maybe. And then they called him to Chicago. But in that year, he planted. And now the Mexican American Commission, which was a state agency, which was one of his, I wouldn't say he was the sole creator, but he was really involved. That became the Latino Commission, Nebraska Latino Commission. So, and when you look back to now where the Chicano Awareness Center has developed all these service programs designed to help students, bilingual students, tutors, and what have you. They've impacted, literally thousands of our young people.
How did you feel about Reverend Navarro impacting South Omaha?
Well, I think we kind of, from where it was before, you have to. I'm going to try to put you in you came to Omaha, or you from Omaha, and you're going to work in the packing houses from the 40s. Now, packing house is considered manual labor that doesn't require a lot of technical skills. The unions had a lot of influence, and they provided a very, very good wage of living for everybody, blacks, Chicanos. Of course, this is a very multi-ethnic neighborhood. Poles, Bohemians, Lithuanians, Croatians, what have you. So South Omaha was a hub of multi-ethnic groups, and people lived in North Omaha, and they had lines like trolley lines that come right up to the packing house centers. Have you ever seen a picture of those packing house centers? They're huge. I mean, they were huge and smelly. But people used to call that the smell of money. And everybody was living a very good life, I would say. That they had, one person could support his family, could buy a house, and actually save enough money to send his kids to school. But like anything else, that created a sort of a mentality in people that was sort of conservative, They went to church, they didn't believe in secondhand. They don't believe anybody needed to help them. They could, a sort of a self-motivating concept when you give people enough money to support themselves. A lot of these older gentlemen and women that were retiring from the packing house had very good pensions. And they, in essence, supported with money the operation of the Chicano Awareness Center. Because they could. In fact, they had better organizing skills, better organizational skills. They had better speaking. They spoke mainly in Spanish. But these guys took over the agency, they really did. And then again with the students full of whiz and vinegar, the students who were the raw brown power, black power, they were really excited, to go in there and support from their perspective. So that the older gentlemen and ladies, they contributed cash money to the center. But that ran out, they started dying. Until the United Way was really the way to go. And I don't know, I know there's other foundations, like the Omaha Foundation and stuff, that is sort of equivalent to United Way, or it might even be part of it. They're the ones who are getting, and there are a lot of grants that they get.
Do you think what Navarro did for the South Omaha community was good or good enough? Would you have done anything different?
No, not really. I mean, it is. It's amazing how farsighted he was, and he was a minister, but he had this this ability to think in big terms, in societal terms, as opposed to focusing in on a little project. So he understood the value of organization, the value of putting in structures, permanent structures that became institutional. He understood the value of community involvement, which in the beginning there was, the Chicano Wellness Center had hundreds, maybe thousands of community volunteers and participants. It was their center. It was their center, and everything emulated from that. But it's very difficult for me to look back now and try to say that I would have done anything different. I was very upset when he left, and I don't know why he left, but I suppose he took him to Chicago to work in the Chicago area. But I didn't. He was just such a great motivator, a great visionary that, and he could talk. You know, he could sit. He could sit there and he would get his point across without having to jump out of it and pound tables. He didn't have to do that, and people really respected him. So he had an organizing ability, and he was strong in his convictions, and he never overpowered the community with his religious background. The Presbyterian Church, the Lutheran Church, they were just like there. Now, I'll say the Catholic Church was nowhere to be found. Catholic Church was just, in fact, they were fighting the concept. And I'm not going to get into that other than to say that we didn't get a lot of help from the Catholic Church. But I cannot convey to you how a person like Johnny Appleseed can come and plant these seeds and how they've manifested themselves into these great institutions. There's no greater testimony than that, and that I could not have done it. I mean, he helped me get a job. I was very good at talking, because I had a job that, took me right with students, personal relationship with students, put them in these different agencies through a program. So the students themselves were like really a part of this, but that was his baby. That was his baby to get me involved, to get offer these scholarships to these Lutheran kids and others. And a lot of them went on. Larry Omaha, he's a famous comedian. He could have been a lawyer. He was going to law school and he decided to become a comedian, so he went to. But you type in on YouTube Larry Omaha, you see him. He's a real famous comedian in California and stuff. He comes home. Other guys went on to be lawyers, doctors, So you can't overemphasize when somebody plants a thought, plants an idea, a concept, and how that thing takes fruition. And that's the real test. And he's done it. It's just all over the place. So the shadow of Reverend Navarro hangs over all of us. But I'm really glad you guys are doing something to document that, because that's one of the things that we don't have is role models. We don't have role models. Somebody heard of Reverend Navarro, maybe they didn't. But you're going to document this and make it part of an offering where it's there. It's going to be digitized. And people can use it as they identify individuals that had a great impact on Nebraska's lifestyle, and how we still, throughout the years, has even increased it without being here. One other thing it did is, for me, is, again, you have to understand that I was a product of a system that made me ashamed of what I was, as a self-hater. And when I met him and got involved with it, I didn't know how to speak Spanish very good, or Spanish music, but through the center I learned how to speak more Spanish, and we started a lot of groups, the mariachi groups and stuff, and those groups have all, they're, in fact, when Don Marcos he's Omaha Arts down here on 25th, Marcos Mora. He's got a building. In fact, they did the mural the other day on his building. But Marcos started, but he has students from Creighton and UNO come over to his institute. And I've been there. Mr. Aguilera, Jorge was our first director, executive director. And he was a retired man. He's an old businessman, but he was a big wheel with the union, with the food workers union. And he even was stationed in Puerto Rico, but he was an intellect. He was an intellectual person who was old, but he was smart, and he ran that center, and he had a great influence, Gregorio Aguilera. And I could tell you some war stories, but I won't, regarding how times were pretty tough, between some of the groups, like Cubans. Our young people were championing individuals like Che Guevara. I don't know if you know who Che Guevara is, or Fidel Castro, or Corky Gonzalez, or Cesar Chavez. Well, Che Guevara, to a Cuban who was being displaced at the time, right after the Cuban Revolution, they didn't like Che Guevara. So there was a big conflict there between our young, and I have to conclude myself, that we were championing the role model like Che Guevara, and we were having to deal with these political issues with other quote-unquote Latinos. So it was tough. It was, I'm going to say, it was not a smooth ride. There was a lot of conflict within the community. It's like when in the black community they went from Negro to black. See, we went from Mexican to Chicano, and the Mexicans didn't want they don't want to be called Chicanos. Chicano is a bad word and all that. But that was just part of the movement, the ideology. Who we're going to name ourselves. You ain't going to name me Mexican American. I am a Chicano. What's a Chicano? Well, that's like for me to know and you to find out. I know what a Chicano. Everybody who's a Chicano knows what a Chicano is. But we had control then. Control over our. It's okay. All right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Or do you want more?
What happened when people came to the Chicano Awareness Center? Was there a process, or was everyone accepted?
Everyone was accepted. The dynamic interplay between the community that identified was so rapid, it was so swift that it was like we had a grand opening. There's 500 people showed up. All this dynamic movement, this swift embracement of the movement, didn't lend itself to structure. There really was no like an intake form. If you wanted to volunteer to be in teach music, you did that. A lot of our dancers were all older people with their wives, which was strange. Even though we had young dancers, a lot of the older people came and that remembered the old days. When I say old, I would mean like your parents, you know, that they came in and they created their own groups, had a really good, really big dance groups. I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome. They put out a show. So there was really no structure. Now, that's because you don't need a structure when this thing is from the bottom up, grassroots. But once you get monies that have something associated with it, where you have to, like United Way Money have outcomes, they have benchmarks, and in order to measure them, you have to have forms. But those are usually for services. You got somebody come in and they qualify for food stamps or something, or Head Start. You know, they would. You need an intake form. But in those days, it was like Dodge City back in the old days. It was something to behold.
There.
I have a question. So you didn't know any Spanish at all? You had to learn it?
Okay, let me put it to you this way. The assimilation process, when my grandparents came here back in 1910, they spoke Spanish only. And then their daughters and sons, after growing up here, they got to learn the Spanish from their parents. But it was never supported by the school system because they spoke and taught in English. So you're beginning to lose that part of your background. Me being a third generation American of Mexican descent, I understood Spanish pretty good, but you never talked it because everybody, I have 12 brothers and sisters. We all spoke English, you know, but we all could communicate with our grandparents. So until you have to make a speech in Spanish, you know, you can't put a sentence together. And that's what the Chicano Awareness Center, you had no desire, there was no value in that up until that point when you began to take pride of who you were. And part of it was the language, the cuisine, the music, the history, the traditions. So I just fell in line, see. So the more Chicano you came, the more you wanted to learn Spanish, or at least communicate or hear music, you know, and talk about those aspects of your life in a very positive, because it was never reinforced by the system, and that's the problem. The system doesn't reinforce it; it leaves you without identity, and that can be very, very difficult when somebody finds out that they're not accepted the way they thought they were going to be accepted. You have an identity crisis, and that can be deadly. Anything else?
I just wanted to tell you the efforts. Actually, there are at South Omaha and I believe at Bryan High, they do have history classes on Mexican Americans and Latino Americans, and then they also have several classes on African American studies.
Good.
So those efforts have taken shape and are in the schools.
But I think that there's I'll say this once on television on this. The issue of white nationalism. Right now we can point to militias, conservative right-wing militias who preach white nationalism. Trump is a white nationalist. Okay. Now I contend that the process of inculcation of the Americas was all based on white nationalism and, in fact, white supremacy. And that is called institutional racism, because through that omission, we were left out in the cold. See, so what's going on now is that while through sheer demographics, through sheer numbers, the predominant culture, the predominant population in America was white. But with the changing demographics, it's becoming a brown country. And because the inculcation, the indoctrination was so great and for the white people that they never seen their advantage that they had, or if they seen it, they were really radical or racial in their discrimination. But I don't think that people were discrimination or that they're radical or racist because they want to be. It's because they've been taught that way. And so now what's happening is they fear that they're losing their country. They want their country back only because they don't understand, have never been made to understand who he is, who he is, who she is, who she is, who you are in relationship to one another. And it doesn't, right now, since the 1776, we have never reflected the Constitution in terms of life, liberty, and justice for all. Yet we hang on to that. Now, as the America becomes browner and whites become less, there's a real fear on the part of white people that they're going to lose their country. And the immigration issue is central to that. The immigration issue, they've demonized, the Republicans have demonized, because there's a lot of power in slitting people and saying, this guy, he's illegal, he's a wetback, he's using up our resources, he should go back to Mexico, okay? But they never do nothing about it. But now, it doesn't matter what they think, you're here, you're going to stay here, and this great white hope comes into town. And he says, first thing he says is, I'm going to take all these Mexicans, these rapists and murderers, and going to sweep them out of town. But how are you going to? No. They all got to go. See, they're not, that's his racist mantra. They all got to go. And what else? Going to build a fence so high. Well, that's music to these guys' ears. So all of a sudden they're hanging on to this. He's going to save us. He's going to take, 10 million, 11 million? I mean, this is so stupid, but that's what's going on. And if we don't look at that racist, that white nationalism model, and if we don't deal with it in the overall context of education and institutionalization so that it reflects an America that's equal and embraces a land of immigrants. We don't turn that into a concept and a working piece of work, where you can go to. They're never going to. There should be the day, but it won't be, where they can look at you and say, "He's an American." They're not going to worry. What are you? Are you Chinese or?
I am.
No. My point is, that shouldn't be an issue.
Right.
You're an American.
I have a question.
Don't holler now.
which is that we're thinking a lot in this program about the importance of memorialization, right? So then So how do you think memorialization then becomes a tool or a mechanism to combat this white nationalism, or
What you guys are doing are right on. But you're doing it in I call chispas, small increments. It has to be an institutional, but you got to start somewhere. Like Reverend Navarro, he started with 9 of us, 10 of us, planting a little seed. Okay, what you guys are doing is memorializing individuals in the community. Now you're going to start building a library of information, documented, credible information, okay, where it can be incorporated into the curriculum. And it should be mandated that they learn about the history of Omaha, its people. That's to say one thing, but to actually get a person and say, this person really, this is somebody that we can identify. You have somebody, now you have your George Washington. Now you have your whoever. Now you have this giant called Reverend Navarro. And this is what he did. And it's very positive. And all of those little pieces together, it should be something that's required by the Omaha public school system to go out there and find out about the Orientals, what Orientals' experience has been, black people, who are their, I can tell you some of the smartest people in the world I met were during my younger days here. Buddy Hogan, Mike Adams, just so many black people that are gone now. They're still alive, but they had to leave Omaha because there was no place for them. But you need to go back and resurrect their contributions. Charlie Washington, create a library, and so that it'll be part of the curriculum, so that you will go and say, oh, I know, and your kids will know about South Omaha. Oh, he's an American from South Omaha, and yeah, his people, people came here to work in the packing houses. Was there a positive contribution to the world economy? When my parents came and worked in the railroad or the sugar beet fields of western Nebraska, that's never been documented. I put the onus on the Great Western Sugar Factory, who hired these people to come, and as soon as they were needed, they send them back. Well, that's not right. So what good am I? What value did my people contribute to this great country? Well, they didn't. Yes, they did. Nobody documented it. And that's what she's talking about. Memorializing history and individuals. And that's great. I'm really, really proud of you. I'm really glad. I hope that you understand that I have a fervor, that there's fire in me that's been there for 70 years, and that you're not going to meet too many people like me anywhere. But I was part of this movement here, and I appreciate what y'all are doing. And even though I'm 70 and can hardly walk, I'll help you any way I can. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. This
so
has been
much.
great. We really appreciate it. You taking your time out to do this, and